Please let's welcome the 25th SMM Conference co-chairs.
G'day. Kaya. Welcome to the 25th Biennial Conference on the Biology of Marine Mammals. We are so happy to have you all here. 1,500 delegates from over 70 countries, regions, nations around the world and within Australia. We acknowledge We acknowledge those of you who are First Peoples, and we acknowledge those of you who are visiting from developing nations. Thank you for making your way to Perth, Western Australia. We acknowledge the traditional lands that we are on. We are very grateful for the Whadjuk people for having us here. And my goodness. And indeed for giving us safe passage to have this meeting, but also for us to be able to live here and have the lives that we have researching Quilana, dolphin, mammal, whale, and I can't remember the name of the seals. I'm so sorry. But we really are so grateful for all of you to be in attendance. We hope that you can experience a little bit of Western Australia. We've tried to share some pieces of what we have in our heart. Like I say, we've been very lucky growing up here, being able to experience the beautiful coastlines, the clean waters, and just this beautiful Whadjuk land and seas that we work on, live on, and dream about. Thank you, everybody.
G'day. As you will no doubt be aware by now, the theme of SMM2024 is culture and conservation, fishing for change. Thanks, Delphine. The rationales behind this theme are several-fold. We wanted to shine a spotlight on the most pervasive threat to marine mammals, their interactions with fisheries, those human-wildlife interactions that have such profound impacts on individuals, communities, populations, and indeed ecosystems the world over. The consequences of our desire to eat or farm other marine wildlife. Secondly, to emphasise the great strides that are being made in the fundamental study of behaviour, genetics and ecology that inform our understanding of marine mammal cultures, and just how important this is for conservation. And last, but certainly not least, to weave a genuine First Peoples thread, a songline, if you will, through the whole conference. Within this broad theme, we have 10 topics on offer, spread over 5 concurrent sessions and for 5 days of conferencing. We really look forward to this rich diversity of traditional ecological knowledge, modern science, technology, policy and outreach. It's time to think of culture and conservation for a week and to go fishing for a change. Cheers.
With 10 topics to choose from, including new science on the show-strings and out-of-the-blue topics, we received almost 1,300 abstract submissions for SMM 2024. Each abstract went through a review process, with every submission being double-blind reviewed 3 times to ensure the highest scientific quality and integrity. We would like to thank to extend our heartfelt thanks to everyone who contributed to this process. This includes over 200 reviewers who volunteered their time and expertise, as well as our topic chair who played a vital role in guiding and coordinating the review phase. Thanks to all of you, we are able to present a scientific program today that reflects the dedication, thoroughness, and passions of our community. We couldn't have done it without your hard work and commitment. This conference will also not be possible without the support of our major partners and various sponsors, from whom almost 1 million Australian dollars, or just over $600,000 were contributed.
So this conference is a family-friendly event. We have created 3 beautiful spaces for the children and hope these will help make it easier for parents and caretakers to participate in the program, have meetings, and catch up with colleagues. You may have seen one of the spaces on the screen as well as you arrived this morning. We have another space in the pavilion where the posters and exhibitors are located, and there's also in that floor a playroom for the kids where all the sessions from this theater will be streamed. If you can't find your way or if you have any questions at all, you can see one of us or our beautiful volunteers who are at the family section of the registration desk. Yay! So we have planned many great events for you to attend in the evenings of this conference. In light of this, we've also decided to start our days at 9 a.m. so everyone can have a little bit lazier morning or leisurely morning. And tonight we welcome, let's go back to the right slide. We welcome you to our film festival, and we also welcome the general public to attend, so that'll be really wonderful. We have a lineup of 7 amazing films, and just that everyone knows, we have 57 films submitted to the festival, so that was great. And we'll start at 7:30 p.m. this evening, and at 6:30 there'll be a drinks and snacks bar open, and we hope to see you all there. And I would now like to invite our president, Simon Goldsworthy, to deliver his address.
Well, welcome everybody. It's really very exciting to have you all here. And on behalf of the Society for Marine Mammalogy, the Board of Governors and the local organising committee, I wish you a very, very warm welcome to the 25th Biennial Conference on the Biology of Marine Mammals here in Perth, Australia. I'd really want to acknowledge the colossal, in fact, gargantuan effort put in over the last 5 years, okay? So conferences are not easy things to put on. They are very challenging and take a lot of hard work. And I really want to acknowledge up front this amazing team. They've just done such a spectacular job. And this wouldn't be possible either without our amazing conference organiser, Kim Rhodes, and her team at Marritt's, and our IT guru, Jarrett Cork, as well as all our wonderful volunteers who've been so remarkable during the lead-up, set-up and registration. And I also want to acknowledge the generous donors. The conference would not be possible without those generous donations, but also with the incredible hard work this team have put in, raising a record amount of sponsorship money in excess of $1 million Australian dollars, which is really remarkable. Okay. be kind, be respectful. As we come together to enjoy this conference, I encourage everyone to be especially kind and respectful over the next 5 days. A quick reminder, when you all registered, you agreed to adhere to the Society's harassment-free Code of Conduct, which outlines the standards and behaviour expected here. If you need to refresh yourself on what's involved or what's in that, you can scan the QR code above here. So please respect each other's boundaries, interact politely, maintain professionalism at all time. And I'd also like to recognise our volunteers. They often, unfortunately, bear the brunt of people's frustrations. They're saints. Let's treat them with the utmost respect. And if you have any questions or concerns or frustrations, please reach out to any of us, and myself included. We'd be really happy to help you resolve any issues. And if you witness or experience behaviour that may violate our Code of Conduct, don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us on stage, any of the Society board members, and Eric Archer, who's the chair of our Diversity and Inclusion Committee, is here, and we'll all work together to resolve any issues. But I thank you all in advance, because I know you're all going to have exemplary behaviour over the next 5 days. Thank you. Two more items I need to cover. Firstly, at the end of this week, on Friday afternoon, there'll be the general members meeting. So I encourage you all to attend and hear about the incredible work done by our committed board and all the committees and what we're doing to support you and advance marine mammal science and conservation worldwide. Two matters in relation to this. Firstly, we'll be needing to approve the minutes of the last general members meeting, which was in August at West Palm Beach in Florida in the USA in 2022. I don't want to have to read all those out to you, the head of that meeting, but they are posted online, and we'll assume that those have been read before we approve them at the start of that meeting. Also, a really important item of the general members meeting is that the board will put forward a slate of candidates for the next general election, which will be within the 2 months following this conference. But there will also be an opportunity for nominations to be made from the floor. If any of you are interested in any of the roles, so the roles will be President-elect, Treasurer, Secretary, Member-at-Large and Student Member-at-Large. If any of you are interested in those positions and are looking to be nominated, you need to be a member, and the person nominating you also needs to be a member. But I really encourage you, if you are interested in being nominated, please come and speak to me or our President-elect Jeremy Kishka, and we can let you learn a bit more about what's expected in all these roles. Finally, it's really amazing that we're all together. It really brings me great joy that we can do this. But we also have to remember those of us that we've lost over the last couple of years between the last meeting and now, who sadly can't be with us today. The In Memoriam began in San Francisco in 2015, and though it's not a long-standing tradition, it has become a really meaningful one to our society. And it provides us with a dedicated moment to honour and celebrate those that we've lost. Whether they were giants in our field whose legacies will endure, or promising talents that were taken from us far too soon, each has left an impact that deserves our remembrance. I invite you now to join with me over the next 12 minutes or so to honour their memory. And while this video may not capture everyone, we do hope to finalise this soon and share it online so it's there for a record to hold these memories. And finally, just to let you know, at the end of this In Memoriam, there will be a quiet period for reflection, and that's an intended part of the program. Thank you for joining me in our Society's In Memoriam.
Please be seated. Jamala Bumalaga, ni Nabu ni Baba, ni Bunj Numban Malanda Dayalang Bora, ni Nuru Whadjuk. Hello and welcome. Good morning. For those who don't know you, my name is Jodi Edwards and I'd like to acknowledge our elders past, present and our sea kin. I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the homelands of the Whadjuk people, I'd like to acknowledge that they have held age-old ceremonies here in this country, and they continue to hold those ceremonies. Today, I'll take you on a journey, one that is engulfed in our culture of story, of song, of dance. And I wish I could take you to the country where this all begins. Sea country. Sea country was, is, and always will be women's business in our country. And we know that because it was created from the tears that fell from the 7 sisters. And if you doubt, if you don't think, next time you cry, lick that tear from your face and taste the salt in the water. I come from a long, long line of dolphins, of humpback whales, and of orcas. And how do I know that I'm a dolphin? Because my great-great-great-great-grandmother sat on the headlands, etched in stone still there today, and she sang to the dolphins. Yambadans, Burawulalali, Yambadans. She sang to the dolphins to drive the mullet as the men planted their stakes in the ground, in the sand, one side to the other. And as they mandania nui, as they paddled out in their nui, those old women directed them. Sea managers. But how do I know I'm a dolphin? Well, I have the same subcordial fat around here. I know you're all thinking it. I too, at the beginning of birth, like you all, were born with a caudal tail. Just like our dolphins. But we'll get back to the dolphins. I will move on. You see, I came here today with that fire in my belly lit by my ancestors about this problem that we have. You call it the killer whale. You have killer whale cafes, you have killer whale museums. That's my kin. The pain when I see, the hurt. But how? How do I know it's my kin? And here's where the story begins. Manayania, Mura, Nina Mea, no Raba, Ne. You see, a long time ago, the women in my country reached out to Muriel, the creator, and they explained to him that there were no law people in the sea, and they asked if they could go into the sea to become the law people. Well, Muriel, he thought about it for some time, And he said, I grant you the wish on your passing, but you have 3 laws to uphold. Remember, always give back to country, especially if you take something from country. Never take more than you need, and always, always remember and respect the mother. And so when the women in my family pass, they go into the sea and they become the orca. And I can hear the whispers in the room. How does she know it's an orca? Well, you know, I'm black and there's a little bit... No, I won't show you the white part. I'll just game and show you that white part. Maybe later. A few drinks. You see, that orca, she's the same as us. We can't become the leader of our pod until we become older. You know, until we go through menopause. Now, I don't think for 1 minute the orca races out and buy a Harley Davidson like I did, but I bet you got some juiced up seahorse there somewhere. Is she riding around? But we both go through menopause. Biological fact, written in our stories, etched in the stone, spread in the sand. From a young age we learn, and as the sea washes it away, it stays in our memory. And what about that other thing? Oh, that clicking. We both got that too. You know, especially when we're thinking. Oh yeah, it's about our babies. You know, we never kick our babies out. We leave them there. Ends up you got your 27-year-old still living with you, yeah? Yeah, you don't know it. You don't kick your baby out. She's so attached to her baby, just like my people are attached to their kin, that she even has a say in who they'll mate with, who'll be their boyfriend or girlfriend. Ends up all you mothers in there, I reckon you want to have a say about who's your children bringing home. Yeah, I know. I'm too. I'm the same way. This interrelationship that we have, it started a long, long time ago. And we never forgot the rule. Don't forget where you come from. Always give back. Don't take more than you need. And in our role, those old men stuck that spear, lit that fire, put that other spear, and he limped from side to side, waiting for that matriarch to come. And those old women stood upon those headlands. Guru, Guru, Yamapuri, Puri. And they sung to the orca, and that orca drove that one beautiful, beautiful buri into the place we call Twofold Bay. And the women, yamba, 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 Nuya, yada, yada. The whale is coming. Get in your boats. And they would paddle out and paddle out. And they would take that one whale. And they knew the law. If you take something from country, you must give back to country. So they cut the tongue of the baleen whale and they gave it to the orca. A thank you. And they took that buri, that humpback, and they brought it in, and that best meat there was given to the elders and shared amongst them. Each part was used. That oil spread fat across the skin of the babies to protect them, to keep them warm, to let them know they too were whale people, that they had that respect in whale country. And the bones, well, you see, they were collected and they were taken out to sea, some used for spear, for digging stick, some given back to country to help fertilise the grounds, to help feed those who may not have a feed, because they never forgot about country. They never forgot their symbiotic relationship to country. And so today we still have some of those practices. Those women in my country, they used to take the hair from their head and they'd weave it and they'd tie it onto poles, onto sticks. I think you call them fishing rods now. First fishing rod, eh? Look at us go now. We created that fishing rod. And we had hand lines made of the bark from the tree. And we taught our kids to remember to sing to the sea kin. Diliwania da da maramaria, 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 Diliwania da da maramaria. We all eat tonight. You see, in our sea country, some things are written in the sand for the tides to what? Away. And some things are written in the stone to remind us, our women's faces, that sea country is, was, and always will be women's business. But most of all, I ask you to remember our symbiotic relationships, our historical relationships, our biological relationships. And please change your language in how you refer to our kin. It's no longer cool to call it a killer whale, because it, it's them men, it's them people that often do the killing. We get back to that. And it's not very cool to call it the southern right whale or the Atlantic right whale just because it's the right whale. So let's change that. Let's just call it the southern whale, the Atlantic whale. Let's change how we relate to sea kin. Let's give her the respect that she deserves, that we deserve. Oh, we're all mammal people here anyway, so you're going to know that. And so, I leave you with, if you're going to take from country, give back to country. Always, always respect our country, and for that you will have safe travel. Wala wala wane dimpeni diana nianabu. Wala wala wane dimpeni diana nianabu.
G'day, I'm the boring one that comes on after Jodi. But I'm more a visual person, and I sing and stuff, but in the shower. And sometimes I'm known to play a bit of guitar. So today I'm going to share with you my kinship structure. So in Gumbaynggirr country, where I'm from, North Coast, New South Wales, our totem is the ocean. I come from a family of fish, so my family's totem is the fish. My mum is a humpback whale. My cousins are dolphins, yugi. My cousins are also sharks, yungai. And everything within that ocean is connected to me and relates back to me. I am part of it as much as it is part of me. Salt water runs through my veins. Everything from the atmosphere, you guys know that, the habitats in the ocean, the body of water that flows into the ocean from the catchments, every creature that exists within there from long time, every season of the sun and the seasons and how they change, every cycle of the moon that we have story for. And then there's Marabe, which is the tree of life that tells the story about sharing. This social structure of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities is based around a broader kinship systems that adopt different definitions of a family compared to that of Anglo-Celtic systems. Identity and kinship reflect the personal connection to plants, animals, and land as part of our personal identity. This collectivist kinship system, which is characteristic of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, means that people think of themselves in terms of their affiliation with other people, species, country, and the communities. And that's not just Aboriginal communities, but all the other ecological communities. These kinship structures are unique to each Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community and the geographic location. The totems defined how individuals relate to each other and to country, and the terms of their roles and the responsibilities and obligations. These kinship structures are cohesive forces which bind people together and provide psychological, financial, emotional, and other practical support. These kinship structures extend beyond human beings. There we are, there's some white dude up the top. But you can see we're all connected. We all know that. We're all smart people in the room. And for a long time, we've been sitting at the top of this triangle, whereas our culture embeds us in this cyclic system. It's complex, it's interrelated, it's holistic, integrated management, ecological systems management, ecosystem management, interconnectedness, deep ecology, adaptive management, landscape management, natural resource management, spatio-temporal connectivity, biodiversity. The language goes on and on. These are all things that we've known for a very, very long time, and it's embedded in our stories and in our landscapes and in our species. The basic concept of ecological management focuses on the active management of biological components within their interaction in the physical environment and their effects on the planet. To create and maintain conditions in which us as a society and nature coexist, let's unpack coexist. It means to exist together at the same time, to enhance and maintain sustainability of resources, species population, all the levels in the ecological web, through time and space, to live in peace with each other as a matter of policy. It's a verb, it's a doing word. How are we doing? These losses and degradation it has far-reaching consequences. Damaged ecosystems exacerbate climate change, they undermine food security, it puts everyone at risk, and not just humans, but everyone. Billions of people are affected by this, and the declines in nature and biodiversity at the current trajectories will undermine the progress towards our 35/44 of the targets of the SDGs related to poverty, hunger, health, water in cities, climates, ocean and land. That's depressing, I won't leave it up there for too long. And preventing large-scale collapse of nature will require effective conservation of more of our land, inland waters and oceans, as well as the world delivering on its current commitments to restore at least 1 billion hectares of degraded land in the next decade. I went on a rabbit hole here, you're going to come with me. And I thought, this is AI, man, I'm going to try out the AI. Everyone else is using it. So I said, how long will this take? And IA come back, it could take between 1,000 and 2,000 years to plant 1 billion hectares of trees, assuming that 1 million hectares are planted each year. And this is based on the assumption that each hectare contains 50 to 100 trees to create a canopy cover. And once planted, it could take a century for the trees to reach maturity. So, okay, well, how many people will this take? There isn't much information on how many people it would take to plant 1 billion hectares of land in 10 years, but here's some related information about tree planting. Deforestation. Every year, the world deforests about 10 million hectares of forest, which is an area roughly the size of Portugal. I said, okay, well, how do we work this out? So, AI came back. Let's say it takes 5 minutes to plant one tree. Doing that 24/7 would take 9.5 million people to finish the job in a year. The population of Switzerland is 8.85 million. They're not going to have time to make watches. So getting back to this, I thought to myself, well, how about, rather than having those exacerbating challenges, how about we have a paradigm shift in human attitude and behaviour which revolves around respect, which is respect to our sky country, our land and our water, and the symbiotic relationships that come with that, and the existing law that was here for a very, very long time. It's a complete shift in how we think, how we behave, how we live, and how we explore. Our stories are old. Some are old, like Holocene old, megafauna old when you could see the seven sisters in the night sky with the naked eye. It's easier for people to think differently, locate ourselves within our bioregions and ecosystems, understand the options we have to minimise impact, and increase these nature-positive actions, redesign our relationships with nature, rethinking our personal, organisational and community-wide governance. Symbiotic relationships. You guys all know about that, so I'm not going to go on and on about it. But you know that there's these main factors in symbiosis, which is around competition and predation, parasitism, mutualism, animalism and communalism. I hope I said that right. And we know that competition is the struggle between two organisms for the same resources in the same environment. Yeah? I want to narrow down a little bit more into these symbiotic relationships. Symbiosis is living together in close association of these two kinds of species or organisms, especially when both benefit both. So it's a close relationship between these two species. And in some cases, one species benefits, or the other does, or no one does, or one just takes it all. Mutualism, communalism, and parasitism. What sort of symbiotic relationship do you guys think we have with Earth? Shout it out. What about the ocean? Shout it out. Entertain it. What about the species in the ocean? I'll let that sit. Don't come back later and tell me what you think it is. So, the significance of cetaceans to Aboriginal nations and the people. For Aboriginal people, the nature of relations is highly associated around behaviour and ways of being, which is law. These systems and functions are environmentally focused and derived. The metaphysical underpinnings are expressed in several ways attached to culture and its practice. These span across both human and non-human communities. The philosophy and metaphysics of nature and humans has been discussed and debated by people for millennia. What nature is, what's our role in it? Where do we fit? How do we relate to it? How does it affect us? How can we take resources for it? How do we value it? Why do we have ticks? They're all important questions. When we look at the elements of Indigenous knowledge systems, we can evaluate that holistic social systems have been built within and around nature's natural patterns, processes and philosophies. For Aboriginal people, the nature of relations is highly associated around behaviour and ways of being, or our law. These systems and functions are environmentally focused and derived, as it said. As such, there are several examples where practices within Indigenous communities are modelled on important behaviours and processes within these natures. And we see these when we go and we see Aboriginal ceremony, dance, etc. Art, perfect example. So our holistic culture, connection and learnings over thousands of generations is a culture built around these ecological and astronomical and biological forms as an interconnected and related existence to environmental processes, the cycles and the practices. These stories and these learnings help us and allow us to understand the world through our metaphysical lens. For us, knowledge is abstract and theoretical. We are able to apply spiritual reasoning as a matter of logic. Spiritual reasoning is therefore a logic for us and provides an interpretive lens for us to learn and to maintain that learning through thousands of generations. Nature and culture are symbiotic on many levels, and it creates this knowledge, holistic knowledge embedded in landscapes, species, star, planet, sky, and country. It encompasses the notion of biocultural diversity. This system produces a body of knowledge and learnings weaved together through our belief systems, our customs, our ceremonies, our learnings, testing and adapting, and an ecocentric positioning of our location in the environment. This sets the foundation for symbiosis of mutualistic respect with kin. That's Jodi's story. I'm not going to tell it, but what I can tell you is that through these relationships from Jodi's story, that between Aboriginal people and other species, you had visual observation and visual communication through signalling, and through these indicators, you had a communication process. You had a communication through song, a vocal communication between two species, with the orca understanding human language and proceeding to drive these animals to help in hunting and food gathering. This animal is giving ceremony. The animal that is sacrificed in this kill will undertake a ceremony around dance and give thanks to life and give thanks to the orca. Stripping back the colonial lens. This is in the public domain, this sits in a museum. And it clearly describes orcas as killers. The killers that killed the whales, the killers that, everything in that town around Twofold Bay and Eden, everything's about killers. They're all killers. When essentially it was the humans really doing the killing. So much so that it depleted our species, which we all are incorporating into our recovery plans. I'll point out particularly the whaling crew, which are all blackfellas from country that had this special relationship, and then it was utilised to then basically start killing everything that was in the ocean. This beautiful relationship of where these animals were almost like cattle dogs of the ocean, our favourite little companions, that walk around with us. There's story of people, cuddling and hugging these animals, singing out to them. And then over here, we see that, there's a note here that says, look at the illustration. One of the killers, the whale crew cutting up the monster. That language, it hurts, and it affects Aboriginal people's emotional and psychological health. Fishing with dolphins. I can talk about this because in Gumbaynggirr country, we are renowned for fishing with dolphins. There's so many stories in my country around the relationship with dolphins. I have one myself. My uncle has one. My grandfather has one. My grandmothers have them. My cousins, my relations, all have stories with dolphins. But we had them as our friends, and we did this symbiotic relationship around fishing together. So they would come in, and of course, the women would sing in the dolphins through the dolphin song. And it wasn't only a relationship between men, it was a relationship between men, women, and dolphins. They were equal partners and equal participants. There's one story about in the top of Gumbaynggirr country where one of the old women used to sing out, old blackfellas call them porpoises, the porpoises each day, when everyone was on holiday. And, this fishing with dolphins goes all the way up to like Quandamooka country and all the way down. A lot of this stopped during colonisation because then non-Indigenous people, I know this story from my country, then started using this relationship to hurt dolphins, throw things at dolphins, feed dolphins shit. And, in some of the places, this relationship between Aboriginal and dolphins does still exist. And at the moment, it does cause some harm. If you want to know more, go and talk to Dolphin Liz. So the other thing that's important is the women who sing with dolphins. So this relationship around sound and language, and the women from Gumbaynggirr country actually had a different vocalisation that was actually nearly on par with the dolphin vocalisation. And so were able to communicate between the two species. I'm not going to go on about that. I'll let you guys read that in time. But The interaction is very, very long and it still exists. Sea aunties. So everywhere, as Jodi said, you go on country, these aunties are still in the landscape. We can see them, and I hope you can see them there as well. But, these old aunties just didn't look after Aboriginal people, they also looked after non-Aboriginal people. So this story is from Yagle country, which is just up the top of Gumbaynggirr country, where an old woman used to go out every morning during the school holidays and sing the dolphins in to hang around where the kids were swimming so that the sharks wouldn't come in. So these relational metaphysics to cetaceans involves unity with the environment, the holistic unity, geographic relationships that reinforces belonging to place, endurance over many, many generations in space and time, development of distinctive cultures or identity in that place, and law is environmentally focused and the living being status of nature is recognised. Environmental entities have personhood, a system of knowledge and sustainability, and seasonal interdependence. A unique language that is descriptive and intricately part of land, sea and skyscape. But there is a problem. Aboriginal people's connection and relational value to cetaceans has been heavily overlaid with colonised dominant paradigms and interpretive viewpoints. This interpretive lens has determined the management and the policies around cetacean management in Australia and in other places. It's always been documented, written and educated from one perspective. The detail of Aboriginal people's relationships with cetaceans has never been comprehensively documented. As a result, Aboriginal people have little recognised platform for asserting our connection and right to manage marine biodiversity. However, there is increasing interest in Aboriginal people managing inshore marine mammals under the broader framework of managing country in cultural marine estates, associated kin and holistic caring for country, which is inclusive of sea, sky and land. I'm going to get a drink of water, but I love how he did that action. That should be our new dance. You can do it again. Land, sea and sky. So some of the considerations, is how do we understand these relationship and connection to cetaceans? And looking at the past and the present interactions between Indigenous people and cetaceans. How do we determine these behavioural interactions and have respect to both peoples? And we call dolphins and those aunties in the seas and my relationship in the seas, as I said, my mum's a humpback whale, so they're an entity that I refer to as also, the same as me. So some of the considerations around our perspectives, identifying, collating and sharing cultural knowledge, we talked about this the other day, understanding those connections, identifying research priorities, and these all assist in this gathered knowledge and shared knowledge in monitoring and how we monitor and implement our management tools, our policies and our practices. Research should be how to apply this Indigenous knowledge for the protection and recovery of threatened and migratory species, but also empowering Aboriginal people to be enabled to provide free and prior informed consent and to be the holders of our own knowledge. Being culturally aware. Being culturally aware during research and policy setting, management through strandings, rescues and necropsies of cetaceans. Understanding that animal that you're about to cut up and take a sample of potentially is my mother, potentially is my cousin, potentially as Jodi's grandmother. Understanding that Indigenous cultural and intellectual property that's attached to it, privileging Aboriginal voices in sea country, recognition and diversity and self-determination, interpretation and inclusion, the rights of Aboriginal people to our heritage, confidentiality. Is it your story to tell? Is it your information to put in a paper and to do in a presentation? Free and prior informed consent. Attribution, benefit sharing and reciprocation, giving back. Access to research, continuing maintenance on cultural practice. Collection and information samples. Whose samples are they? Interviewing Indigenous individual people. The publications that you write. We talked about this the other day. You know, why can't the Aboriginal person that you're working with also get a doctorate if it's their information that you're using in your thesis? Industrialisation, commercialisation and pastoralisation, and return of materials. These are all cultural significance and sensitivities for Indigenous Australians and Aboriginal people of Australia. Awareness in the engagement is vital when situations arrive concerning the welfare of our kin. If we don't do this, we will have further decline and loss of the environment and our kin and our species. For Aboriginal people, it's loss of our storylines and associated species, it's loss of totemic and kinship species, loss of intergenerational knowledge and culture transfer, loss of language, loss of song and songlines, loss of identity, and loss of cultural ecological knowledge. Because this information library is existing in the landscape, it's existing in the language, it's existing in song, it's existing in dance, and it's existing in the species, and it's existing in the storyline, and it exists in the people. The value is in the dynamic process of the relationship and in the relation. Many people ask me, how do we then, put a value and some monetary and economic value on this sort of thing? Can we? I don't know. But here's something to think about. Timescale. I first did this with one of my friends, Sarah Lena. She's out there in the crowd. She's a SEAL girl. And, one of very few scholars who started her PhD going beyond 1788. Going back to this timescale of knowledge. I've had to jam it in because it's take up too many screens, but then I've taken 2 squares out of this and put them into 1,000-year increments. So here's 20,000 years, and that red line down the bottom there is colonisation. You with me? You getting it? We now have something in a piece of legislation, the EPBC Act, which basically asks for the inclusion of traditional ecological knowledge. That won't happen until we shift the paradigm. So I've turned it then down into 10-year increments to make it a little bit more narrow, because big timescales like 120,000 years, people have a little bit of trouble comprehending. So when we put it down to this, in the last 233 now, years of merit of Indigenous knowledge has been constantly given the backseat in biodiversity management, or included as a novelty, or the true science or significance of TEK is lost in the romantic notion of the concept. This is where we are at the moment. The rationale is knowledge in all its form is key to effectively protecting and recovering threatened and migratory whales and dolphins. Scientific knowledge is being effectively used to informed understanding of population status, trends and habitat use. Indigenous ecological knowledge also has a huge potential to contribute to our understanding of threatened and migratory whales and dolphins. A key problem at this stage is the knowledge has not been considered, collated or analysed. But is that what we do? There is an absence of Indigenous perspective and a deficiency of cultural knowledge for protecting and recovering EBPC-listed threatened and migratory species. This EPPC Act heavily prioritises the views of Western science. And as I said in the last workshop, that's your guys' science. If you want to call it something else, get together, work it out, and then we'll start giving it the term as well. But at the moment, it's the dominant paradigm. Indigenous knowledge and views are diluted in the formal provision of advice to decision makers. This affects the overall culture as tokenism and the symbolism of it. Rather than one of genuine inclusion of Indigenous Australians, the Act is not meeting the aspiration of traditional owners for managing our sea country and significantly protecting our heritage and our kin. A recent review of the EPBC Act asserted Australia's environmental law was not working for the environment, business or community for a range of reasons, including that traditional knowledge is not valued and there is that culture of tokenism. Aboriginal people have been responsible for the development of many innovations and technologies through time and space and have continued to substantially contribute to modern science. Science is the pursuit of knowledge. The approaches to gathering that knowledge are culturally relative. Indigenous science incorporates traditional knowledge and Indigenous perspectives. Together, they contribute substantially to modern science and understandings in how we manage sea country. Aboriginal perspectives are holistic and founded upon the interconnectedness and reciprocity and the utmost respect for nature. Both Western and First Nations or cultural science approaches and perspectives have their strengths and can greatly complement each other. Thank you.
That was literally the coolest I've ever been. Thank you. I just want to move us on to the welcome to country. Thanks very much.
Kaya, wanju nonakan Whadjuk nyunga buja. Hop wiran kulin nija. Murich, wankani. Jenna bidi, Jenna. Waranka nija, Jenna. Nija, war. What? Murich. Wanju nija nunakan danyini ni Jenna wankani. Whadjuk buja. Maman ngunis, yogas chukan. Murich. Hello and welcome here to the land of the Whadjuk people, of the Noongar Nation. Welcome to all of the men, the women, the brothers and the sisters, and all of the leaders, the Burias who are here today. Kārijan jinangang. To listen, look and learn from one another about our seas, our Wadaran Nija. For many thousands of years, our ancestors have walked these lands, their footprints hitting the dirt. And as they have danced and sung, the dust has flown, floating through the air, leaving the stories behind. Sometimes there have been tears of sadness, but also tears of happiness and joy, love and laughter, as people have sat around the campfire, sharing the food and the water, bullabarup, and telling their many stories. And what an honour and a privilege to hear the previous stories connecting the sea, nija, quilana, jinang, mamang, jinang, jibba-jobbling, jinang. The whale, the dolphin, swimming through the seas as they are now. We listen, ne, jinang, we see. Kindness and respect, nicha, and dignity is what we ask. We want to be there. We want to be a part of these stories and the teaching and the learning. Our museum is called Bullabarup, the place of many stories. And here you will hear those today, because we will all learn something from one another. And as we call out to the ancestors, whenever we go hunting, that's what we do. My grandson happens to have Tiwi and Larrakia songlines, as well as Whadjuk Nyungar songlines. So Jirikape the turtle, Koya the frog on Nyungar country is a part of his totem. And these totems are so important to the connection to the land and the story. Nija borlu jinang, nunakandak nini, double yerrigan, marigara nija, karagara jinang, walyalap, wajamap nija, double nara, jalgara nija, karamurda jinang, mandun, jundalap, jiralak, kongalak, boyalak, marawak nija, nija, Whadjuk Nyungar buja. From the north to the south, the east to the west, this is Noongar country. And here in Borlu or Perth, as you sit, listen, look and learn this week, ngabalangunda nija walbrinjanang. Margara, the birthing place, the women's space, which is just behind us. We then go past down the Derbyurrigan, the Swan River, and we see Karagara, Karakumba, Jinangang Bow, the very special King's Park. Because as you stand on top of that hill, you can see afar all of these important places. We travel down to Walyaluk, Fremantle, cross the ocean to Wajimap, the place of truth-telling, cleansing and healing last Saturday, with the apology from the Premier to the atrocities that happened at that place. Down to the Derbyl Nurra, back to Jalgara, and of course Karamunda, the Darling Ranges, Mandun, the place of many trees, and Joondalup. All of this is Whadjuk country, and we welcome you from afar, from Larrakia, Mianjin, Gadigal, Nija Naam Wiradjuri, Nija Luricha, Palawa, Nija Ghana, Nija Aranta, Nija Whadjuk Buja. So from all around Australia, welcome and welcome. Ngalakan Kang Nija, Ngalakan Bola Jinang, Nija Natcha Kulinwa, Nija Jinang, Karijan, Yanka Babinga Nija. As you listen, learn and walk on this land, may you make very loyal friends. Keep safe as you are here. And for those of our countrymen who are visiting, go down to the Derbyurrigan. Stand in your bare feet on that sand. Lift the sand, rub your hands together, throw it back into the water and introduce yourself to the Whāgal. And you will be safe as you journey on this land. Yanka. Thank you.
You can see the abstracts and the full bios of the keynotes and the plenary presentations on the website for the conference and splashed around on social media. In introducing each plenary, I'll take just one snippet of those little bios that I think exemplifies either the presenter or their presentation. This morning we have a true luminary in our field that really needs no introduction, but I'm doing so anyway. Helene considers the supervision of over 60 PhDs who have made a difference in the world as her most significant achievement. That's a wonderful sentiment. Now Helene of James Cook University will be presenting our first plenary, Culture and Conservation, Fishing for Change, Learnings from a Global Review of Dugong Status and Trends.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks, Jodi. It's the first time I've ever been introduced with a song, and it's greatly appreciated. So today I'm going to contribute to the conversation that we're going to have all week about fishing for change. And it's about, through a completely different lens, a global review of dugong status and trends. But before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the elders of the land on which we stand. And I'd also like to acknowledge the elders and the traditional owners of the hundreds of sea countries across Northern Australia who regard the dugong as a culturally significant species. I'd like to acknowledge all the people who've contributed to this review, and some of whom are here, the people from all over the world. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the funders, the Environment Agency in the United Arab Emirates, UNEP, and the Convention for Migratory Species, and my university. My talk today will cover 4 points: the adverse interactions between dugongs and small-scale fisheries. I'm certainly not going to be talking from an Indigenous perspective. I'm going to be talking from the perspective of local peoples, most of whom live in developing countries. I'm going to talk about the biological and socioeconomic reasons why dugongs are so susceptible to such adverse interactions. I'm going to illustrate with 4 case studies which show the huge diversity of the problem. And I'm going to call on our society to build on our Barcelona Declaration of 4 years ago to work with others to take practical actions to progress this issue across the globe. So for those of you that don't know, dugongs don't occur around here. The water's too cold. They're the only plant-eating animal that's strictly a mammal, that's a marine mammal, I'll get it right in a minute, that's strictly marine, and is a vast coastal, subtropical and tropical Indo-West Pacific range from East Africa across to the Solomon Islands and Vanuatu, and including Northern Australia. Small-scale fisheries are a major cause across this range of mortality and habitat loss. Dugongs feed on seagrasses. Seagrass communities are incredibly important to local fisheries, and they're very damaged by nets, and as exemplified by that photo of a seine net in Polk Bay near India. The best, most comprehensive information comes from interviews with more than 10,000 fishers in developing countries, 23 range states. And I want to make a couple of points. The first one is that gill nets are the most pervasive of these and widely distributed of these gears. However, dugongs are taken in a wide range of gears. The interviews showed that 10% of the respondents who were asked about dugong captures reported them. Not the whole 10,000, most of them were asked this question because it's very sensitive in some parts of the range. Now, the first reason why this is a problem is that, like most marine mammals, dugongs have very slow, long life histories. The information about this comes largely from carcass studies, but has been largely, I think, confirmed by longitudinal studies conducted by Janet Lanyon and her group. So, dugongs have very well developed growth layer groups in their tusks. You can see them in that lower figure. And one dark layer plus one light layer equals 1 year's growth. Their lifespan can be over 70 years. Their age of first breeding is very variable, but between 7 and 17 years. Their calving intervals are long, between 2.5 to 6 years. They have very long periods of maternal care. The maximum rate of increase of a population, and not too many increase at this rate, is about 5% a year. And widespread seagrass loss results in recruitment failure. Now, this is best shown, it's been shown multiple times, but a good example here is in this age frequency histogram in the right hand of this side of this picture. Young dugongs did not come into the fishery, but you can see that gap in the age frequency histogram. That coincided with a major seagrass dieback in a very remote area in Torres Strait between Australia and Papua New Guinea 20 years before these data were collected. Dugongs are obligate bottom feeders. You can see this photo of a dugong. It looks like its muzzle looks like a floor scrubber, and they're feeding on low biomass seagrass. These seagrass communities also support communities of fish and prawns which are targeted by fisheries. I want you to notice the sensory hairs all over the body. They're like cat's whiskers all over their bodies. Hold that, because we're going to come back to it in a minute. Like other marine mammals, dugongs have to come to the surface to breathe, and they also have to feed on the bottom. Renee Lambourne's work, and go to her poster on Thursday, using multi-sensor tags, show that dugongs dive hundreds of times per day, increasing the risk of gill nets. Basically, they're inhalant breathers. How much air they take in depends on the depth of the water, but they're generally diving in very, very shallow water. And if, as they're feeding on the bottom, they run into a gill net, and particularly at the end of a dive, they'll tangle, they spin in the net, probably because of those tactile hairs, and they just run out of air and drown. All sirenians, dugongs and manatees are essentially tactile auditory specialists with less emphasis on vision than many other marine mammals. So this is a brain of a manatee, but I see no reason this work hasn't been done on dugongs, but I don't imagine it would be very different. The red area of the brain, 24% of the sensory parts of the brain is related to those tactile hairs. The auditory part of the brain, the green bit, is also very well developed. But the peak hearing is very different from dolphins. So there's only been one attempt to see whether or not, and these are exploratory experiments that Amanda Hodgson and I did, whether or not dolphin pingers would work with dugongs, and this was done in an array simulating a net, which has been criticised but was necessary on ethical grounds. And basically, the dugongs ignored the pingers. They fed throughout the experiments. They didn't investigate the noise, and they didn't change their behaviour or likelihood of vocalising. That is preliminary work, but I think the very different sensory modalities of dugongs make the sort of technological deterrents that have been so far developed for dolphins unlikely to work. Now, the dugong's range includes many densely populated, low-income countries where small-scale fishing is absolutely vital for food security. Now, this graph is one of those three-dimensional human population density maps. So the height of the tower is an indication of the population density. Now, you can see a few things from that map. One of them is that Northern Australia, where most of the dugongs occur in this country, has very low population density. You can see that Perth, in that map, hardly makes it in terms of major big cities. And you can see some of the other big cities in the range, but look at India, with the largest population on the planet and incredibly highly densely populated, and compare that with Australia. But most of the rest of the range has far greater human population density than Australia. The other thing to look at, I've coloured the coastline of the dugong's range using the Human Development Index, which is an index of essentially the richness of a country. It's used by the United Nations. It's one of these multi-dimensional indices, but let's take that. A few things to realise. The red is low human development. You can see that the African side of the dugong's range are mainly very poor countries. The Asian countries are either mainly medium or high HDI, with the exception of Malaysia, which comes in as very high. And then we have some rich countries around the Arabian Gulf, Australia and the French colonies, including New Caledonia. The next thing is there's another one of these indices called the Corruption Perception Index. And low means more likely to be corrupt. And it's obviously very difficult to maintain laws when you have poverty, corruption and conflict. And more than half the dugong's range states rank low on the Corruption Perception Index, and of particular challenges, of course, are very poor countries with high levels of corruption. But there are also concerns about conflict. So if we look at dugong range states that have been racked by conflict, and I've just looked at some current ones, are countries like Eritrea, Myanmar, New Caledonia this year, Somalia, Sudan and Yemen. So they're very different problems in different countries. The other thing about dugongs that actually makes them vulnerable is that the meat is delicious. And you can see there the meat on the left-hand side of that picture. It's very light meat. Yes, I have tried it, full confession. I was given it by Indigenous people. It tastes very like veal or pork. And that makes them very valuable commodities in many places, even though the sale of the meat is almost always illegal. But if you're a poor fisherman living in one of these poverty-stricken countries and you get a dugong in your net, there's probably enough, you can sell it illegally and you'll get enough money to feed your family, your impoverished family, for 3 months. I'm going to illustrate the diversity of this problem in 4 case studies. 2 rich countries with very different outcomes, Australia and Japan, and then India, the transboundary stock between India and Sri Lanka, and in Mozambique in East Africa. Australia is the lucky country when it comes to dugongs. The total population estimate is around 166,000 animals. We have a very high human development index. We're rich. We have a low human population in the dugongs range, and we have a vast, shallow continental shelf in the tropics. It's about the geography, and we're lucky. 81% of the mapped seagrass in the dugongs range is in Australia. Now, that is utterly an underestimate an overestimate of the proportion in Australia, but it does give you an indication of how different it is from many other places. Now, in this graph here, the blue lines are the potential dugong habitat, the coastal waters less than 20 metres deep. And in each case, we put the mapped seagrass. As I said, 80% of it is in Australia. We know that not all the seagrass in the dugongs range has been in Australia, has been mapped in Australia, but it definitely gives you an indication of the serious lack of habitat mapping in most of the rest of the range. There are at least 2 bays that I know of in Australia where the mapped seagrass, if those bays were a country, they'd come in 3rd after Australia and Indonesia. The Indonesia, maritime Southeast Asia, which is Indonesia and the Philippines, has the greatest potential area of dugong habitat. But it's fragmented among 25,500 islands. So it's a very, very different situation to the situation in Australia, where the habitat is still fragmented, but because it's all on the continental shelf, it's much less fragmented. Most dugong important marine mammal areas are in marine protected areas. And as a rich, non-corrupt country, we can effectively enforce those areas. You can see that there is very good concordance between the IMAs and the protected areas. Giuseppe and Eric said to me, "Oh, is that because of the IMAs?" I said, "No, Eric, it's not because of the IMAs, it's because the same scientists advised both groups." By 2027, there will be virtually no gill netting in the dugongs range in Australia. Is that... That's not just because of dugongs. A lot of it is because of the threats to the Great Barrier Reef World Heritage Area being put on the endanger list. But dugongs did lead the first closures in the Great Barrier Reef in the 1990s. And the latest structural adjustments and buybacks in that area, we're now down to 27 gillnet licences in an area of 365,000 square kilometres, just extraordinary, cost $57 million US dollars this year. And they're all going to be gone, and they're going to be largely gone everywhere else. There's less than 40 now across the whole north. But very few countries could possibly afford to do that. And the human population density and the food security needs are so different. So now let's consider another rich country with a very, very different outcome for dugongs. In 2019, the dugong was listed as critically endangered in Japan, and some people consider that it's functionally extinct. Japan is another very rich country. It has very low corruption, actually lower than Australia, and a very low human population in the Nancy Islands where dugongs occur or occurred. They were harvested in the Nancy Islands for 6,000 years. Of course, there could never have been the sort of population that exists in Australia. There simply isn't the habitat. That was largely to pay for taxes to royalty. They were harvested commercially between 1894 and 1916, and a lot of animals were caught, 300 and something. The last 50 years, the mortality has been from incidental catches in gill and set nets and illegal direct catches. Genetic analysis shows that there has been a long-term and continuing decline, extensive inbreeding, and a reduction in heterozygosity. It's estimated that there may be less than 10 dugongs left in the Nancy Shoto. This is kind of a vaquita sort of situation. One hasn't been seen since 2016. There are still feeding signs, and there have been some dugong poos that have been genetically identified. So they're still there, but very small numbers. So what happened? Well, I think that there was a concentration for geopolitical reasons on the wrong thing. There was an agreement between the American president and the Prime Minister of Japan to relocate a military base. It's very controversial. There have been very leading court cases in both the United States. Think dugong versus Rumsfeld. Dugong won, but it didn't make any difference. And the problem with this was that there was some habitat loss with dredging and reclamation. It was about 70% of the Nancy seagrass, but being pro-dugong meant anti-base, which meant the government had a completely hands-off attitude. Actually, the government had a pretty hands-off attitude anyway. So the response to the problem of fisheries impacts has been very little. There were fishers trained on how to release dugongs from a net. One was once rescued. And gill netting and set netting continue in about 4,000 square kilometres of what's called common fishery right areas. And in 2022, there were 450 gill nets, vessels, 70 set nets, and local unlicensed gill nets. People think that dugong is functionally extinct in Japan, and they're probably right. Now go to South Asia, which I think is a bit more typical of many places in Asia. In India, as I said, is the world's most highly populated country. It's a very densely populated country, and fishes are very poor. There are 3 isolated dugong populations. One in the, you can see in the northwest, in the Gulf of Kutch, very tiny. There's a transboundary stock between India and Sri Lanka, which is the one I'm going to talk about. There are dugongs in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and there is a paper about this today, I think, this afternoon. The 20th century catch records in both India and Sri Lanka indicate that hundreds of dugongs were caught in both countries. So currently, both the Wildlife Institute of India and the Sri Lanka, under a Global Environment Foundation project, have been trying to attempt this problem. But there is no transboundary agreement. People have been calling for it for 50 years, for a transboundary agreement to do something about dugongs. There are 900 vessels with the potential to kill dugongs and 3,100 vessels with the potential to damage seagrass in the 7,000-kilometre IMA between these 2 countries. There is no reliable data on incidental catch or dugong population size, and as you can see from the right-hand photograph there, it's a deposit area, and there is significant problem from marine debris, including ghost nets. Now my last example, which might be a ray of hope, and this is about the critically endangered subpopulation in East Africa. I haven't coloured around the Madagascar in this photograph because that population is considered that it may be genetically extinct from the coastal population, which is the one that IUCN has deemed to be critically endangered. There are very small numbers of dugongs along the coasts of Kenya and Tanzania. There's very low genetic diversity in dugongs in this area. However, there is an apparently stable population of about 400 animals in the Bazarutu seascape in Mozambique. This is a key biodiversity area. It's an IMA. There's a national park, and there's a wildlife sanctuary. These lines are aerial surveys. The population has been regularly surveyed using very good techniques. There are still fishing vessels, but they're all operating north of the national park and the wildlife sanctuary. But there is some good news, and some of this is good management and some of it's good luck. So Mozambique is a really poor country. The average salary is $29 US. Small-scale fisheries are a major source of food security and income. But most of the fishing is not gill nets, it's seine nets. And why is that? And that's because there are quite a lot of pelagics in this area, and seine netting is more effective. Gill netting is prohibited in and around the national park and the sanctuary, and unintended gear is banned in Mozambique. And there's now also a regulation which is going to take a while, I think, to be implemented to ban seine nets to enable seagrass recovery. Still, about 400 vessels, mainly seine netters, are operating north of the park. But, and this is very significant, the Mozambique government entered into a 25-year agreement in 2017 with African Parks, an NGO, and they have 250 staff in Mozambique, 99% of them are nationals. They have an annual budget of $3 million a year and a 25-year commitment. They have a very comprehensive program. They invest in community development, biodiversity conservation, management, including effective enforcement and infrastructure. And most importantly, 16% of the tourism revenue goes back to the community. This was $80,000 in 2023, and it's projected to increase to $200,000 in 2025. This is an amazing situation. So in the review, we've looked at the overview of responses to fishing impacts. There are plenty of laws. There are laws in 39 range states, which is virtually all of them. There are marine protected areas in 24 range states. There's fisher education about the dugong bycatch problem in 21. There are alternative livelihoods have been attempted in 14. Gillnet bans only in 4. Risk assessments like Ellen does only in 4. And release incentives in 3. But enforcement is not adequately documented in many places. The effectiveness of responses is not formally evaluated. I don't think there are appropriate performance indicators almost anywhere. But note, technical deterrents have never been attempted. Outside Australia, our review shows that there are only about 6 locations where there are confirmed populations of more than 100 dugongs. More than 1,000 would only be in the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea. Are there other places where there are more dugongs? Probably, but we don't know about them. So I think the dugong's range map is in danger of being rewritten. Do I think they're going to be extinct? No. But do I think they're going to be lost from much of their range? Yes. But it's not only dugongs. As Temple et al. Showed in 2021, there are a bunch of IUCN-listed odontocetes at risk in these coastal waters as well. And this is a few of them. So my conclusion is, universal solutions to addressing the impacts of small-scale fisheries on marine mammals is very unlikely, especially in low-income countries in which fisheries are major sources of food security and livelihoods. I think that research at local scales could enhance our understanding of the diverse perspectives and worldviews of communities and highlight the importance of considering the local context in policy development. Ketki Jog, and she'll be talking later today, her systematic review has shown that such research is very rare. So what could our society do? Our society 4 years ago proclaimed the Barcelona Declaration, and our Goal 3 indicated the importance of this problem. I think the time is now that we have to think about practical solutions in partnership with FAO, the Convention of Migratory Species, IWC, IUCN and others. And so I'd like to make a suggestion to you, which I have developed after conversations with people in FAO, Convention of Migratory Species, IWC and IUCN over the last few weeks. First thing I think we could think about is to promote IMAs, important marine mammal areas, as priority places for action on the effects of fishing on marine mammals. I think that we have to have multi-species approaches. The IWC is obviously limited to dealing with cetaceans, CMS, migratory species. I looked at the 30 dugong immers outside Australia, and this is a frequency histogram, and you can see that most of them support multiple marine mammal species. I also think we could develop best practice guidelines for research for various bycatch situations. Now, I appreciate that for many of you, these low-income countries, bycatch is not your priority, but you could also develop best practice guidelines for research for other situations. I have talked to the bycatch counsellor for CMS, and this was his suggestion. He said, research is often inadequate. You are a scientific society, you could develop best practice guidelines, and then they could come up to the board and the society through the Conservation Committee or whatever committee structure the board decides to have in the future. The guidelines could build on and incorporate best practice recommendations for designing and conducting and reporting on bycatch questionnaires, which Sarah Tubb and Per Bergman published a couple of weeks ago, and other good work that's been done. The CMS counsellor, scientific counsellor for bycatch, has offered to help because he thinks this is such an important gap. So let's talk this week. I'm calling a meeting with the President's permission in his boardroom, number 1, on the first floor of the Convention Centre tomorrow at 8 a.m, and I'm hoping that some other people who are interested in some practical action in this topic will come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helene. If I could just ask for, Jodi and Chels to come back up. We're already over time, I'm afraid, but we will allow a little bit of leeway here, given the significance of these presentations. So if there are any questions for any three of the two keynotes or Helene, fire away. There is a mic standing on the stairwell in each section over there. I know they're extremely intimidating people, but please ask away, or if you don't have questions, come and see them, or you don't want to go rob.
There you go.
Which side? Is that on? Yeah. Thanks, Simon. Helene, that was amazing, as always, and thank you, Jodi and Shay. Look, we have the committee that does research. You know, it's a very small grant that the Society's been running for about 15 years, the CIGAR grant, and I was just wondering if we should incorporate into the guidelines for that grant something along your lines, Helene. I mean, it seems like the perfect avenue. You know the grants for developing countries from the Society?
It's a bit hard to hear up here. Could you just ask that question again, please?
Sure, sorry. So it's for Helene, and we in the Society have been running for about 15 years a grant scheme that gives money for small research projects in developing countries. And my question is, should we use that as an avenue to provide financial support for research on bycatch problems in developing countries in these immers?
He said there should be more funding, or should we be directing our funding?
That's an interesting question, and that's one that was raised with me by a board member from a developing country. And I spoke to the chair of the Committee of Scientific Advisors about that, and she said that in her time as chair of that committee, there had never been a request for funding for research on bycatch in developing countries, which I think is quite shocking.
So yes would be the answer. Yes. So yes would be the answer.
So I think yes is the answer to your question, but that would have to be something that I think the board and the society as a whole needs to consider, rather than just me as one member.
Yeah, totally. And we have had bycatch research programs before under the previous chair, just to...
Yeah.
Hello, thank you all for your amazing talks. They were really inspiring. I have a question for all three of you. I was wondering, as research scientists, what resources are available or that you know of to be more sensitive to cultures and inclusive when we're going into countries where we're not maybe aware of all of the cultural sensitivities that we should be?
That was for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, all three of us.
Yeah, I think so.
You can answer that if you want.
I think you should answer.
I think you should answer it.
Look, as an Aboriginal person from Australia, I really can't speak for Aboriginal communities in other countries. What I can say is, if you're going to pursue academic or research relating to Indigenous cultures anywhere in the world, you really need to forge relationships with the Indigenous community that you're going to work with. And work with is, I think, the big takeaway on that. I think it's also looking at, if you're going to be privileging the knowledges of Indigenous people and you're doing it as a researcher for whatever reason that it could be, but a lot of times it's for the purpose of getting a PhD, then also that person or the people that you're working with and utilising their cultural knowledges and their intellectual property right should also be awarded a PhD in that place.
I'll just add on there that in Australia, I refer people to the IATSIS Code of Conduct in doing research. But the other thing is that we have been talking to the society, and we're hoping to forge a little bit further in this space by actually bringing together, what do we call it? Strategy. Some sort of strategy and code of conduct and all those other fantastic words on how to work.
Best practice guidelines.
That's it. Good work. That's it. Best practice guidelines. We're working with Indigenous people on marine mammals. Yep.
That'd be amazing. Thank you so much.
Join the membership, and then you'll get a copy or a draft to have a look at and comment on, probably.
Thanks a lot. If we could have perhaps just two more and keep it fairly rapid, if you can. Cheers.
Hi, I am from a third world country, and I could tell you that corruption in a lot of third world countries are not something that could be solved on a time scale that will be aligned to conservation, right? And so you're going to have to deal with that level of corruption, but I've never heard anybody talk about alternatives to solving issues of impoverished people. So that will be setting up maybe a sustainable fishery farm in a lot of these countries that will solve that problem from, hostile fishing techniques that will destroy habitat. So if you have some type of funding that would be put forward to having some type of sustainable farming fishery, that would be something that would be practical and an effective solution versus not having that and letting these impoverished people try to fend for themselves. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should go to the meeting tomorrow morning as well. It's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I think this is part of the suite of topics that would need to be covered in the best practice guidelines.
Yeah, thank you all for your presentations. They were amazing. Just following up on the cultural sensitivity question, would there be benefit in championing the use of social science techniques, especially with local researchers and local communities, so that we can tap into those cultural sensitivities and also perhaps avenues for reducing bycatch impacts ahead of time, rather than try and wade in and get it wrong?
It's hard to hear you guys through the mic. It's very muffled down here, and
it's a sound quality issue.
It is, yeah. And plus, you know, I'm an ex-DJ with DJ deafness, and I won't speak on behalf of Helene's hearing impairment, but yeah, it's very difficult to hear. Here we go.
Absolutely.
I think that's about as long an answer as we need. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you very much. Please thank each presenter again.